Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Whitney Stoll. I'm the DC Post president. Alongside me is joining me today is Bree Beal and Jim D'Amelia, who are behind the scenes and moderating our chat today. We have over 100 registered participants from all around the world, so I know you're excited for this program as much as we are. So joining me today is our guest presenter, Judy Bratt from A Summit Insight. This educational presentation is a follow-up from last year's April First Friday webinar on micro purchasing, and we will talk about how simplified acquisition can be another tool for your GovCon pipeline. Judy's going to dive into the FAR regulations and the other thresholds and requirements and talk about how purchasing options you have can help build and grow to support the government programs on your services and products. But first, I'd like to welcome you to introducing you to the First Friday webinar series, which is provided to you through SAME's commitment to offering the AEC community effective training, development, and networking programs. The DC Post is helping sustain the future of the profession with these monthly education-focused sessions to deliver topical and relevant content to our industry. So thank you all for joining us here today. So please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, and any contact information to everyone throughout the presentation. Ask questions so we can address them through the Q&A portion at the end. Also, we are using the WebEx application. So if you would like to save the chat, feel free to go up to File, go to Save, and then click Save Chat. We are recording this session. We will post the webinar on our YouTube channel later on this month and send you the slides, including your PDH certificate, as soon as the webinar ends. So we are glad we can offer you an hour of education and virtual networking, regardless of where you're attending from today. So let's start with a moment of silence to remember our active duty military, first responders, and all who need our care and thoughts in the world right now. Thank you. And please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. We'd like to take a moment to thank our DC Post annual Platinum and First Friday sponsor, Fox Rothschild. We truly appreciate your support. We cannot put on our events without you, and we are grateful for your outstanding sponsorship for making this program possible. Your support helps us meet our society goals, including providing excellent content for our members, industry and government engagement, building resilient communities, and connecting our future leaders through our student and young member groups, enriching the STEM pipeline, and preparing our military and veterans for life after service. If you're not already a DC Post sponsor and would like to support our post with annual sponsorship, we would love to add your name to a slide for future programs and events throughout the year. Annual Platinum sponsors and First Friday sponsors help support this webinar with free registration for SAME members and full-time students. So please visit our website for more information about sponsorship levels and how you can get back to the SAME community through your DC Post sponsorship. And now it's time for the main program. And please note that this program provides one professional development hour through the DC Post. Look for an email with the subject line document delivery from SAME DC and Eventbrite with a copy of the program slides, your PDH certificate, and a list of opt-in attendees who pre-registered for this session. We are recording this webinar and we'll post a video on our website later on. I'm not going to read to you the learning objectives on the slide, since most of you saw the same objectives when you registered. Instead, I'm going to introduce to you our featured speaker in just a moment. And while I do the introduction, if you haven't done so already, please feel free to use the chat, introduce yourselves, share any contact information, and where you're calling in from. This is your webinar series to help you learn about the special topic, as well as help you expand your business network throughout the program. Share comments, ask questions to the presenter. If there's a particular slide you want to talk about, please share that in detail in your chat question. We'll be sure to answer the questions in the chat at the end of the program. And again, don't forget to save the chat before you exit the webinar. And now, please allow me to introduce Judy Bratt, the CEO of Summit Insight. So for over 35 years, Judy's been an expert in federal contracting. Her practice centers on the journey from contact to contract, transforming data into relationships that vendors need to succeed with federal buyers. As a consultant, speaker, and author, she's helped thousands of established businesses, small, mid-tier, and large, find their fast track to success in the federal arena. Judy's proprietary players and layers methodology gets her clients in front of the right federal buyers faster on their way to wins totaling over $200 million. You can pick up her latest book, the #1 bestseller, Government Contracts Made Easier, on Amazon, along with her companion strategy workbook. So right now, let's find out more on how to make it easier happening for you. So please welcome Judy. So Judy, I'm turning it over to you, and the floor is yours.
Whitney, thank you. It's a joy to be with you and to support the incredible community of SAMI in all the ways that you serve our nation and help so many people achieve their missions. So, our mission for today is to understand when federal buyers use simplified acquisition procedures and how you can use them to grow your federal business and, if you're in government, to achieve your mission. So let's jump right in. We're going to cover what simplified acquisition is, why it's important, when buyers use simplified acquisition. We're going to talk about the numbers, how much gets spent, where set-asides for small business fit in, what kinds of things people are using simplified acquisition procedures to purchase, how it works, some highlights, not all the details, where you find the opportunities and the details, and then Q&A, and I'll have some resources for you. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat. I'm happy to be interrupted as we go along, as well as take questions at the end. And if we don't get to your questions live, there'll be information where you can contact me on LinkedIn or other ways or book a call. And so let's get in. Our federal buyers are all asking themselves these 4 questions, whether they tell you this or not. Here they are. Do I know you? Do I like you? Do I trust you? And how can I get to you? Simplified acquisition answers this question, how can I get to you, if those other 3 things are true? Because our federal buyers have 2 things that they need. They need stuff, products and services, and they need legitimate, expedient ways to get stuff. It is our job as buyers, it's our job as vendors to come to the party with answers to both of those questions and be able to start the conversation. Buyers still get to choose how the purchase is taking place, but putting yourself in the buyer's shoes when you're having those conversations can really help. So, what are the 3 things federal buyers want most? You want to write these down. You master these 3 and tell me if this is right. Drop it in the chat if you're on the buying side. Here they are. Follow the rules. Make it easy. Make me look good. Give me a yes in the chat if these all sound like things that you really wish your vendors would have in mind. And if you do these 3 things, you're going to at least be somebody that people want to talk to. Michael says yes. Thank you. Exactly right. So, what did the federal government spend last year in contract awards? $758 billion. And 65% of that, over 65% of that, was competed one way or another. And so how do we get at some of that a little more easily? Simplified acquisition is one of those tools in the kit for buyers and sellers to connect. So why is simplified acquisition important? These procedures were created to reduce administrative costs, improve opportunities for small businesses to participate, improve efficiency and economy in contracting, and just make things easier. It's not only how small business can win big, it's how everybody can win big. So, simplified acquisition, think about it as one of the easier buttons. Warranted federal contracting officers have the authority to purchase goods and services using streamlined procedures, using minimal competition, or in some cases, even something that is or is very close to sole source, following the rules in Federal Acquisition Regulation Subpart 13. If there's one thing you write down and take away, bookmark FAR Part 13, make yourself a commitment to at least skim that part of the table of contents and become familiar with where to find answers and details there. It includes, but is not limited to, micro purchases. So micro purchases are a subset of simplified acquisition. We're going to highlight a couple of things about that. But simplified acquisition represents a low risk opportunity to build trust between buyers and sellers. Dr. Brene Brown has a model that acronyms out to the word braving and talks about 7 key elements of how trust is built. And simplified acquisition gives you an opportunity to do all 7 of these things, to demonstrate you understand boundaries, to show that you are reliable, to show that you are accountable. When you screw up, you own your stuff, you take responsibility for it, and you make amends. The vault, to show that you can practice confidentiality as appropriate, that you can behave with integrity, that you can be non-judgmental. We're all human here, and not make assumptions about things you don't understand. And generosity, to behave and appreciate others in a way that suggests that you know they're doing the best they can. So those elements of trust, each one of trust is built based on one small interaction at a time. Think of it as putting marbles in a jar to fill up your trust jar. All the things that are involved in winning smaller contracts are a way to build that store of trust. And so think of it that way. Top of mind question for people on this webinar: can simplified acquisition be used for construction? Yes. Right off of Defense Acquisition University, it says the procedures in FAR Part 13 provide streamlined processes to acquire supplies and services, including construction. If you are on the buyer side and you've never used simplified acquisition for construction, you could. If you're on the vendor side and you're thinking, I want to do business with an office or a program where I haven't done business before, this can offer something to start the conversation between buyer and seller about how this might be a way to do some smaller projects and get to know each other and build that trust and confidence in each other. So when can contracting officers use simplified acquisition procedures? They can be used to purchase goods and services valued below the simplified acquisition threshold. Simplified acquisition threshold, while there's a nominal amount that's defined, and you'll see that on the right-hand side of the screen, as $250,000 in normal everyday situations, and it can rise to as high as $750,000 if a situation has been designated as an emergency or disaster response or contingency operation. The actual thresholds are defined at the agency level. So General Services Administration or the Army Corps of Engineers, for example, or Veterans Affairs could define that uniquely in one or more circumstances. And so FAR Part 13 is a starting point. I do not recommend that you print out FAR Part 13, roll it up into a big bat, and bash your way into the contracting officer's door saying you're supposed to do this. Do not do this. It will go badly. Take the time that you spend reading FAR Part 13 and be in awe of the level of detail and complexity that federal buyers have to master and are responsible for complying with, and start the conversation. Wow, this looks really sophisticated. Would you tell me a little bit more about how this works in your office? Every federal agency also has a Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. The best known of those is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, or the DFARS. But every federal agency has their own supplement. You can find them on acquisition.gov. So read the parallel subpart 13 for the agencies where you're doing business. Show up there with appreciation for what those buyers have to be aware of and compliant with. A word about disaster response. In the calendar year in North America, June really opens what is typically regarded as hurricane season. As well, this is a time when times of climate resilience, you also need to be aware that more severe weather events can be happening in Tornado Alley as well. And so in the Midwest, the ability to participate and offer expertise and recovery services has everything to do with whether you build relationships long before something happens. And so, especially as you get into the spring of the year, it's a great time to start conversations to make people aware of, if you're on the buyer side, what kinds of things you might need in a big hurry. And on the vendor side, how prepared you are to offer products and services and get them and get yourselves and your team to where someone needs help in a big hurry. And I'll just put a pin in that. And I'd love to tell you more about that another day. That when we were preparing for this was a topic that I know some of you are interested in. I would love to speak with you of it in detail if you like. When can contracting officers use simplified acquisition procedures, not only to purchase goods and services below the simplified acquisition threshold, but after considering mandatory sources of supply, including GSA schedules, other indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts, or other established contracts that may be in place. So they've got to think about what are all the other ways that I could do this by, say they thought about it before choosing to do this. This is the choice the contracting shop has. Just because they can do this does not mean they shall do it. Be aware of that. 2 keys to success from top federal vendors: start small, be persistent. And micro purchase and simplified acquisition are ways to start small and build trust. I have here a QR code that links to the webinar that we have done before with great detail on micro purchase. Super powerful, super cool stuff that's under $10,000. I'm going to give you a quick highlights here and then offer this code again in the resources section at the end. Micro purchases are a subset of simplified acquisition. Micro purchase highlights, and I want you to read the details. The contracting officer has power, options, and responsibility. Their purchase and payment procedures are this far. They can use any acquisition method described at subpart 13.3. They can add provisions. They have a lot of flexibility. And they must consider mandatory sources of supply. But if you can solve a problem, offer a scope, do an assessment, provide some education for less than $10,000, having ideas for how to solve someone's problem with a micro purchase could open the door or start a conversation. Purchase guidelines are at FAR 13.203. To the extent practicable, the contracting officer needs to kind of share it around. So don't expect that you can always win, not realistic. And micro purchase can be awarded without soliciting competitive quotations if the contracting officer or the appointed individual considers the price to be reasonable. So reasonable price allows a purchase with low documentation requirements. Purchasing guidelines concerning price are also here at 13.203, and there's details about when they don't have to think about price too much. And you'll want to be familiar with these rules and take a little bit of time to talk to your buyers, talk conversations between buyers and sellers about how this works for them in their office in real life. There are over 80,000 federal acquisition professionals in the federal government, and it would be reasonable to assume that there's about 80,001 interpretations of the federal acquisition regulations. Everybody does it their own way. They're doing it in the way that helps them follow the rules and be safe. How big is a micro purchase? In federal civilian agencies and DoD, micro purchase can be valued up to $10,000. In disaster response or contingency operations, up to $20,000 inside the United States and up to $30,000 OCONUS. What do federal buyers use micro purchases to buy? Things like micro consulting seminars, data analysis, reports, operational assessments, training, workshops, lunch and learn. I had this conversation with a professional services expert this morning, and he was talking about how hard it would be to design a system for $10,000. I said, wait, but could you offer expertise in how to identify problems before they start? Let's say you're in construction. Could you offer someone a lunch and learn seminar on how to identify that you may have roofing problems in your future that you need to prevent? Sure, you do that all the time. Imagine somebody paying you to provide them with education on how to look out for signs that you should be doing some prophylactic maintenance, some preventative care. Think about that, because somebody could pay you for that expertise. Where are micro purchases advertised? They're not. These are a relationship sale. These are opportunities. If there's a watchword you keep in mind, don't wait, create. Don't wait for these opportunities to go to someone else. Make friends, figure out what problems you can help somebody solve, and what could you do for not very much money that really demonstrates you perform over the top, you do what you say what you're going to do, you get it done on time, on budget, and make your buyers shine. Make your buyer look like a rock star. Simplified acquisition, by the numbers. Buyers are using simplified acquisition procedures more every year, showing over 6% annual growth from one year to the next. Simplified acquisition procedure use has grown from 17.3 billion in 2013 to 28.2 billion, nearly 4 times growth since fiscal 2020, when it was only 7.5 billion. Clearly, there's something that's very attractive about using these procedures, and more people are using them, and they're being used more often every year. What are people using? Buying with these simplified procedures. Here are the top 10 NAICS codes that people are using. 73% of simplified acquisition spend today is for services other than construction. Flip it over. 25% of that spend is being used for construction, and more could be used. This is very much a question of what a buyer feels comfortable doing. Have the conversation. If you are a federal buyer or program manager and you're not familiar or that comfortable with simplified acquisition, because of the way the rules are set up, simplified acquisition is also set up to be a tool to encourage contract awards to small business. And that means that the person, your point of contact in the Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization Office or Office of Small Business Programs, or OSDBU, the OSDBU, the person there is, and the people in that office are certainly going to have expertise or be able to point you to somebody who's got deep expertise in the ooey gooey details and can have a conversation with you outside of the public eye, so you can get a little more comfortable with how this works without feeling vulnerable and feeling like you don't know your stuff. Of course, you know your stuff. You're very good at what you do. Oh, my buyers on the federal side. But if this represents new territory for you, tap the expertise in the small business office. They're not just there to nag you about your small business numbers. They're there to help you make it easier. They're also there to help you be a rock star. Hey, big spenders, who's spending all the money on simplified acquisition procedures? Unsurprisingly, I would say all the usual suspects: Department of Defense, Veterans Affairs, Agriculture, Health and Human Services. These are all numbers that are growing. State, Homeland Security, Transportation, Interior. And all of these that are highlighted in yellow, they have been growing since 2017. In the case of DoD, they spent $4 billion more using simplified acquisition procedures since 2017, and the number has nearly doubled in Veterans Affairs over that period of time. Understand the numbers. Do buyers use simplified acquisition procedures more at fiscal year end? The answer is a big fat yes. Not surprising. There's not only do things, we're human, things get left to the last minute. Congress also often delays opening up funds or operates on continuing resolutions that limit when funds can be spent, which means that sometimes the money isn't available till later in the year. So look at that number. unsurprising that more of these procedures get used in the last quarter of the fiscal year. That means that the time to have conversations between buyers and sellers about simplified acquisition is in a quarter that's not the federal fiscal year end. So second quarter, third quarter of the year, in January, February, March, April, May, June, great times of year to just say, hey, how might this work? Is this a feasible way to do a project together? How often are simplified acquisition procedures used for one-off purchases versus to make payments or award tasks under bigger contracts? Nearly 2/3 of the spending using simplified acquisition procedures are for one-off purchases. So those small projects and jobs, perfect spot to consider using these procedures. And this is in fact how people behave in real life. These are numbers from last year. The percentage in 2023 of simplified acquisition spending that was set aside or sole sourced for small business was 48%, nearly half of the spend using those procedures went to small business. And that was up from 32% just a year before. And so policymakers who intended simplified acquisition to help send more opportunities to small business have reasons to be happy about that. Now, flip it over. That still means that even if your business is large, you actually still have a little over half of that spend. That 52%, thank you very much, was not set aside for small business. And so small simplified acquisition procedure awards are made to both small and large vendors. That's the takeaway from this slide, from this data. Number of offers received. Take a look at this data and realize what this tells you. This is all pulled from sam.gov contract data past awards. When you look at how much competition there was, 30% of simplified acquisition procedure awards were made on one offer only. So it was put out there, there's going to be a simplified acquisition. It wasn't set aside, but there was only one offer. 59% were made based on up to 3 offers. This is, and then with 14% blank, 73% of simplified acquisition dollars are awarded based on 3 offers or less. This is a relationship sale. Simplified acquisition procedures are not limited to things that are worth less than the simplified acquisition threshold. I'm going to say this differently. Simplified acquisition procedures can be used for purchases and acquisitions that are valued at more than $250,000, and not just in times of disaster response. When else can contracting officers use simplified acquisition procedures? It can vary by agency and by circumstance. This is a reason to have a conversation between industry and government in the contracting shop. Contracting officers can use simplified acquisition procedures for purchases above that $250,000 threshold, up to $15 million for certain kinds of commercial services. And I'm going to tell you what a commercial service is in just a second, and can go as high as $100 million with the correct levels of approval. So these are tools that can do some very heavy lifting. FAR 2.101 defines a commercial service. I'm going to read this one for a second so you really have this. It means installation services, maintenance services, repair services, training services, and other services if such services are supporting a commercial product as defined in the section. You have to read the rest of it, regardless of whether the services are provided at the same time or from the same source as the commercial product. And the source of the services has to be providing similar services at the same time to the general public under similar terms and conditions as they're offering it to the federal government. This is a reason to bookmark or make a note to yourself to take a look at FAR 2.101, see what it says, and understand that that's going to be your go-to place for putting together an agenda for the conversation you have with the contracting shop. Tell me, do you do this ever? What does this mean to you? 60% of the simplified acquisition spend in fiscal 2023 was for contract awards worth over $250,000. I'm going to say that in 60% of the spend that was made using these procedures was for contracts or agreements that were worth more than $250,000. And that's up from only 52% in fiscal 2017. So how much is that spent? $17.2 billion was spent on those larger contracts. How interesting. Well, who was making these big spends? Unsurprising. Does this look familiar? DOD, VA, state, USDA, HHS. DHS is a little further down the list, but this gives you an idea of who's doing those bigger projects. What are they doing with these procedures at these big dollar buys? Lots of professional services. Engineering services is showing up as one of the NAICS codes in the top 10, $118 million. I won't quite say there are people on this webinar who wouldn't bother getting out of bed for $100 million, but that's probably split between a lot of people. How much competition is there for these large transactions? Once again, competition for these things, 75%, 1 to 3 offers, more relationship sales. So how do you win a simplified acquisition? Referrals. First of all, if you're already performing well, people want their friends to do well. So if you're on the vendor side, you might want to recommend, ask your buyer to who else they know that you should be talking to. Most federal buyers do not wake up in the morning thinking, how could I dump a bucket of cash on Whitney's head? Now they should, but they just don't. By asking for the referral, they go, oh yeah, Whitney's performed well. I'd love to make sure that he's got lots of opportunities to grow and be strong. And I want to make sure my buddy also has the benefit of his expertise and performs well. I'm happy to make that introduction. You have to ask. Performing well, continuing to show up and bring value. Of course. How do you work with simplified acquisition if you haven't before? You might have a colleague who, if you're on the government side, who's done a lot of work in simplified acquisition. They may be willing to share, yeah, here's how we do it. And here's how this is really easy and it's never gotten us into trouble. And we've always been able to spend our money at fiscal year end. I challenge you, drop in the chat. Who here has ever had suddenly a chunk of money and someone said, all right, can you spend this before the fiscal year end and you've got less than 4 weeks to go and you're going, if only I had a way to do this. Has anybody ever had money lapse or give it away to somebody else because you didn't know how to spend it? This can help you solve that problem. Be able to offer best value as well as great price, sometimes being the people who are there and able to respond quickly. All of these can be reasons why a simplified acquisition procedure could work well for you. It's a relationship sale. Remember that your federal buyer is more than one person. There are what I call the players at all 5 layers that have an ability to advocate, make it easier, help people meet each other, help people understand capacities and how they match with requirements. Small business specialists, the contracting officer, the people in the end user layer. And by that, I mean everybody from the program manager to the person on the surveyor in the field, people who are stuck with the consequences of choosing that vendor. Lots and lots of people in the end user layer have a lot of opinions about the kind of service they're getting, not getting, or wish they'd gotten. So build lots of relationships there. The stakeholder, that's your base commander, your CIO, your district engineer. Those folks are typically often not in the room when you get chosen, but they are the first ones who are going to be on the front page of the Washington Post below the fold if things go tango uniform. So you've got to know who they are. They set the priorities and the buck stops there. And prime contractors or industry, current primes, large and small, and competitors. So understanding who all these players are is really important. Simplified acquisition offerings can absolutely help grow your business, can help you build past performance, can help you demonstrate realistic pricing, can help you win work in a way that is profitable, can provide an upgrade path, smaller projects that are, or things that are phased. You can demonstrate or do an earlier stage or a smaller project that can build into something later. You can demonstrate how quickly you can deliver and get a project finished in time for the fiscal year end and get that pesky project nobody's ever been able to finish done in plenty of time for September 30th. It's a great chance to go and deliver successfully a project that can be scaled up or replicated if it's successful, and a fantastic way to set yourself up for being the vendor that other people want to refer to their friends. So time to get creative. What could you do if you're on the vendor side, or if you're on the buyer side? What could you do, or what would you want to achieve for under $250,000? Here's some suggestions to get your brain thinking about it. If you're on the vendor side, for the sake of all that is holy, have your short list stuck on your phone or somewhere in your files, and know what are some of the small things you could do. Maybe you've got a limited number of user trials if you've got a product. I know almost everyone here is concentrated on the service and expertise side. You might have a single location demonstration, maybe some non-destructive testing, one-on-one training, some kind of situation evaluation, pilot program, field trial, webinar, a briefing, a prototype. There's all kinds of things. If you're on the, when I worked for the Canadian government, and that was where I did my first 15 years of service in the federal arena, I always had my fiscal year end funding fairy file. When somebody came tearing down the hall with 6 weeks to go before fiscal year end and said, who can help me spend a whole bunch of money? And going, me. I always had the project definition set, 3 vendors I could compete it with, the one who'd been talking to me the whole time about doing the project. I'm not alone. I always knew how to spend money at fiscal year end, and smart buyers also are set up for that. And if the person that you're talking to in a federal agency has never really thought before about what would they do if they got money at the last minute, again, have that conversation in the early part of the calendar year so you can circle back and say, I'm ready for you. So simplified acquisition represents an opportunity to grow. This is why it's awesome for vendors. The simplified acquisition is supposed to be set aside for small business if the acquisition's under $250,000. Doesn't always happen, but small business gets the first shot. It signals that a buyer is willing to put money and a signature on the line and demonstrate they trust you. You can do some creative projects and small things. It's a fast way to rack up past performance. What have you got if you win and perform well on a simplified acquisition? You not only have almost $250,000 in your bank account, you've got past performance. Past performance breeds future wins. You can finish a small job, get paid faster. Who doesn't want money in the bank? It's an opportunity for repeat business or reorders. Can be an opportunity to grow bigger orders or projects, opportunities for referrals, and it's a powerful fiscal year-end option. And it offers significantly higher threshold options once you know the rules. For buyers, simplified acquisition is simply awesome on account of speed and low risk. In short, lower dollar value means lower risk. There's flexible, faster solicitation options, less documentation required for sole source, which can happen, contributes to meeting small business goals with a lot less pain, establishes newer supplier trust levels, solves fiscal year-end spend problems. It also can represent risk. Buyers cannot unbundle a bigger purchase. Do not break $1 million job into 4 or 5 parts. Do not ever think about it. Buyers are encouraged to seek 2 offers or more from other than the previous incumbent. Don't always see the same hands. Repeat purchases under that threshold suggest that maybe a bigger contract vehicle it's time to consider something else. Prices have to be reasonable, and they've got to consider mandatory sources first. Can doesn't mean shall. May doesn't mean shall. So they may use these procedures. They don't have to. This is their choice. Simplified acquisition can be vulnerable for vendors. Don't ever propose breaking a big project into smaller bits that are under threshold. It breaks the rules. You don't ever want to do that. You can't win them all. Expect that you're going to have to share the opportunities around. This happens at the discretion of the CO or KO, contracting officer. And public purchasing means public scrutiny. Everybody is very, very visible, and so compliance with the rules is critical. It's their choice, not yours. So Think small. Keys to success. Start with the data. If you have not already mastered going into sam.gov past federal contract data, or if you like USA spending, you can go there. I don't like USA spending as much because there are 3 fields that you can only grab if you're using free public data through sam.gov contract data. The field is created by, approved by, modified by. These 3 fields have information that identify in whole or in part the name or the email address of the person who had created or modified or approved the contract transaction. These are clues to leads, the people who have their hands on the approvals. The data will show you who buys, how they buy, how much they buy, who they're buying from. Once you see who's spending money on what you do, think about what problems could you solve for them. That data shows you things about what people need, who they're doing business with now, and lets you think about if they're doing or buying this thing now, when might they need me? If your company is small, engage the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization to answer specific questions about making connection with the right people. Discover end users that have needs and problems, figure out what you can do together, and then go together over to the contracting shop and say, hey, how might this work? The time to do this is not on September 15th. Have these conversations long before fiscal year end. This is a relationship sale. Other keys to success. Again, make friends with everybody before the end of September. With the contracting office, the question is, how does this generally work in your office? With end users, what's that annoying job that won't go away? The project nobody wants. What's on your wish list if you got handed money at the end of August? With contracting, how could we make this purchase work? Ask questions. So, highlights of the regulations. Again, you'll want to look at FAR 13.102, which says you should use SAM as the primary source of vendor information. So make sure your SAM registration is active. Go in twice a year, not just once a year, just refresh it because you can. It will also keep people from sending you solicitations, nagging you and providing distractions and wanting to sell you things you don't need. And especially if you offer products, but if you have labor rates, make sure that the information on your website and your capability statement is up to date and aligned. There does need to be competition provided under certain rules and certain thresholds. Pay attention, realize what has to happen and when, and talk to contracting about that. There's less requirements for putting everything on SAM in certain kinds of situations. So learn when those are and be aware that you're not just going to be waiting for something to be published. You're going to be working with someone who's going to be telling you, here's what we're doing and how we're publicizing it. And here's where you want to make sure you're ready to put your offer out there. Considerations include whether or not the item or service you need is available, whether electronic commerce is available, whether there's an urgent purchase, how big the purchase is, and how familiar somebody is with price reasonability. Sole source can be done with simplified acquisition rules, and there's different levels of authority depending on whether it's under the simplified acquisition threshold, under 15 million, over 15 million, but less than 75 million, or over 75 million. But the authority is there. It just takes more people to buy in to be able to say, yep, we can do this. We can use this procedure to sole source. Price reasonability doesn't have to be the primary consideration if somebody's putting together an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract with lots of players, but then that also means that the task orders have to consider price reasonability under that contract. To sum up, simplified acquisition, start the conversation between industry and government, and that includes at events like the SAMI DC Post holds, at industry days, at small business events, at the SAMI National Small Business Conference. These are all places to talk with individual people in specific offices with needs about whether they like simplified acquisition, dislike it or can't even spell it and don't know where it is in the FAR. Find out where people are and what they think about it. Each contracting office is unique. Treat people like that. Ask how it works for them. So, does your buyer use simplified acquisition? Find out. Get the facts in sam.gov contract data, export it to Excel, go to town, learn things. And then that's a great springboard to then take that information to the small business office and say, help me sort this out. Or work with your Apex Accelerator team. And Whitney can tell you more about where to find them and how helpful they can be, but their help is free and in every region. So simplified acquisition, the least you need to know. The spend is over $28 billion and growing. Threshold is normally $250,000, can rise to $750,000 in situations of disaster response. They're supposed to be set aside for small business under that threshold. They are used for commercial items, and 60% of that spend is over threshold. 75% of that spend is done based on less than 3 offers. And they're frequently not advertised on sam.gov. A recap of some ideas to think about what could you do worth less than that threshold. That first win can be small, but its impact can be large. And the analogy to making your first climb on little rocks in an indoor climbing gym can lead you to climbing something bigger. There's a reason why I'm mentioning that, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So we covered a lot, and we've got time for Q&A. We talked about what simplified acquisition is, why it's important, how it works, when it's used, how much is spent, set asides, what they buy, where you can find them. I'd love to hear some questions. Next steps you can take today: review the regulations, understand the risks, develop some offers, focus, and start the conversation. And real quick on resources. Again, this is the link to the complimentary webinar going in great detail about micro purchase. If you're trying to figure out what am I supposed to say to the players at all the layers, my GovCon Personas Guide is free. There's a QR code and a link that you can grab this infographic and the whole report and figure out what to say to who when. If you really need to get in front of your federal buyer to win that first meeting and get invited back, there's a file and a webinar that can tell you more about that. It's one of my favorites. I'd love to share this. And one more way that federal buyers and vendors can get together is our monthly GovCon Rockstars Indoor Rock Climbing Social. When I'm not doing government contracting, I'm a professional indoor rock climbing instructor. I've literally taught over 1,000 people to go up a wall. On typically the 4th Thursday of the month, we get together at Sport Rock in Alexandria, Virginia. Whether you know the ropes or you've never climbed before, we take care of you. And it's a place that welcomes not only federal buyers and vendors, but bring your family, bring your colleagues, bring your kids. Everybody is welcome. We have a great time, and it's free. And so we'd love to see you. Next event coming up, you'll see all the information about that in the FAQs at this QR code. It would be wonderful to see you. So with that, Q&A, what do we got?
Well, Judy, thank you very much. That's definitely insightful in seeing how simplified acquisition can be utilized. So for those on the call, feel free to put your questions into the chat so Judy can ask them. We have one from Joe. It says, "How do we identify our odds debut?"
Love that question. They are the easiest to find people in the entire federal government. They are paid to talk to you. And so in every single federal agency, and often the sub-agencies or districts or regions has at the top of their website something about doing business with or for vendors or small business, something like that. That tab at the top of the navigation usually takes you to a landing page that includes the contact information broken out by program area or component or region with names, titles, phone numbers, email addresses. You can also just dump it into Google and go, I don't know, Army Corps of Engineers, Baltimore District Small Business Specialist, or OSDBU or SADBU. They are super easy to find. Certainly, it's a great place to start the conversation right within your SAMI post. Your SAMI post is going to know
Yeah,
where the people
we'll
are who are
know. Yeah,
supporting you.
absolutely, Joe. And we can definitely help you out and guide you in the right direction on that, because it can there's lots. All depends on where you are and which agency you want to go after. So
And don't be shy.
yeah.
People can be real shy about, I'm going to be talking to someone. Am I going to get it wrong? I don't know what to say. Relax. The only way that you can mess up a conversation with a small business specialist, somebody at the OSDBU, is if you are actively vindictive. Right? Really. They answer 50% of the conversations the people at the OSDBU have are start this way. Hi, I'm a service disabled 8A woman-owned veteran-owned business in a hub zone. What do y'all do? So imagine getting that question 50% of the time. So any question you ask that's more insightful or more detailed or more specific than that, their eyes are going to light up. They can hardly wait to talk to you. And even if that is your question, that's okay too.
So Judy, have a few questions.
Yes.
So how does a simplified acquisition look for a small business versus one for a large business?
Same procedure.
Same procedure, same
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
All right, that simple as that. So if a government agency has to bid out wants to bid out a potential project by a simplified acquisition, how can I make sure that my firm has the winning bid? Do I have to have the lowest bid when the option is announced?
Not always. The price is a consideration, but best value, urgency, ability to meet the requirement, technical ability, past performance, trust. These are all factors that go into the decision. If you see a synopsis or something that if the first place you see an acquisition, an opportunity is online, there's less than 30 days to go, and you don't know the buyer, you don't know the budget, you don't know the incumbent, you don't know the history, your odds of winning are in the single digits. The most valuable thing you can do if you see the perfect thing and you don't know anything about it that you think you'll just bid, stop. Peel out the point of contact information there. Do a bunch of research into that person, that office. It's very rare that a federal buyer or office is buying literally the aircraft carrier. They're buying something they're going to buy once in 50 years. They're probably going to buy more of whatever that thing is somewhere near them another time. So say, hi, we just noticed that you're buying this thing. We'd love to get to know you after this thing is over because we know you're super busy right now. We know you've never heard of us. Okay. Use it as if you don't know anything else except, oh, good, something to bid. Pause. Now, sometimes people win those, but bids take time. You're going to spend time and you're going to spend money. All you get to choose is the mix. If you have to choose between knocking yourself out to do a proposal or taking the time to get to know humans, get to know the humans first. It's going to make your proposal odds of winning much better.
So that comes down to my next question is how do we find the right people to talk to about our services that would qualify under simplified acquisition? So we have a big conference coming up next week. The SAME JETC conference is next week. Is that a right place to talk to the right people?
Great question. The answer is a big fat maybe. The people at that conference, think about the players at all 5 layers. Please get the GovCon Personas Guide. I'm just going to pop back to this so you can get the that link once again while I talk about this. Okay. Players at all 5 layers. Small business specialists, they're your cream puffs in a nice way. They're super easy to find and they can help you navigate. And the contracting layer, remember I talked about the created by, approved by, modified by field. That's in sam.gov past federal contract data. There's 2 layers. Industry layer, who are the current primes? Who are they doing business with? That is in the vendor field of past federal contract data. So suddenly you've got a small business specialist, contracting layer, and vendors. The stakeholders, they're going to be the people on the big stage. Don't hit on the stakeholders. Don't hit on the district engineer and say, hi, who needs my service? It's almost embarrassing. You don't want them, you don't want to be begging those folks for introductions. If you're already working in their districts, it's a great time to say, wow, Sally just rocks. She and her team are doing an amazing job. Much better. Okay. But that's okay because they're not the ones who are choosing you. Okay. And so finally, that end user layer, some agencies, departments and programs have employee directories. They publish contact lists. State Department has it in a PDF. Health and Human Services has an online employee directory that will make you glad your tax dollars pay for something useful. Veterans Affairs, not so much. LinkedIn. Over 2.2 million current federal employees have profiles on LinkedIn. So that another thing that you can do is think about the typical job titles of the people who are in roles that you're working with every day. And then use LinkedIn to search that geography, that agency, these sets of titles, and that's a starting point for you. So that's the high end of how can I find my players at all 5 layers. To do that in a methodical, systematic, efficient way, that's something I do with my clients every day, but certainly something you can learn. You can learn as well by working with one of your Apex Accelerator counselors if you want to get some time with them. But it's certainly something that if you want to learn, I'd love to chat with you and hear whether or not I could be helpful to you that way.
Well, great. Well, if anybody else has any questions, Judy's more than welcome to stay on for an additional few minutes, but we do need to close up. We're getting close to the top of the hour. So thank you again, Judy. It's definitely been very impactful. I know Simplified Acquisition, a lot of people can definitely utilize it moving forward. So, and thank you all for joining us and participating in today's session. I've definitely enjoyed it, and I know we definitely had interest from our participants here today. But before we wrap up our program here today, I would like to share some of the upcoming events that we have planned. So please mark your calendar for some of the upcoming local post events, as well as some of the upcoming national events. We are committed to bringing you more content and fun events throughout 2024. So our next First Friday session is this summer. We're combining June and July. We are hosting the webinar on Friday, June 28th. As always, all registered participants will earn 1 PDH. Learn more about how building assessments and high-performance envelope construction can achieve optimal project outcomes with Bob Duke, a certified air barrier specialist with building envelope and assessment and repair. Registration is open right now. Are you interested in sharing your knowledge on current educational topics for the First Friday series with our members? We are now accepting presentation applications for late summer and fall. Visit our website to learn more and submit your topic today. Sponsorships are also available to support the popular program. And please mark your calendar for upcoming DC Post opportunities. Would you like to reach a community of 7,000 architecture, engineering, construction, technology leaders? DC Post's annual sponsorship. With the DC Post annual sponsorship, you have the opportunity to leverage our networks and showcase your firm with visibility and international recognition you won't get anywhere else. Support the annual membership with sponsorship, program sponsorship, just like the First Friday series with our or to our regional leadership and mentoring program, or at individual events throughout the year. Check out the benefits of sponsoring and support our mission of the DC Post and your community today. And then join the national SAME community during the Joint Engineering Training Conference and Expo, JETC, in Orlando, May 14 through 16. We are looking forward to attending, and registration is open. Bree and I will be there with Ed Chamberlain and Anna Ehrman presenting on a panel called Building Your Company Differentiators to Win Big. So earn PDHs, network, and celebrate the achievements of our AEC industry at the awards program and military ball. So please join us in Orlando in May, and registration ends in a little under a week. So you can learn more at visiting their website. So again, thank you for attending this First Friday webinar series with Judy at Summit Insights and providing excellent content today. Be on the lookout for document delivery in the subject line with the slides, the PDH certificate, and an opt-in list of registered participants today. And we'll post a recording on our DC Post website later on this month. You will also get an email from our presenter with more information and what was presented today and how you can sign up for the newsletter and announcements on upcoming events. So thank you all. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Thanks, Whitney. Bye-bye.